Well, after a long time off traveling the world and having operations and who knows what else, Phil Beisel is back with us today. And what a perfect time to come back, Phil, a week after the Robotaxi's out on the road. And I'm expecting that you have a couple of things to talk about.
Yeah, it was awesome watching that. I mean, it was quite incredible. I wish I was there. Um,
Yeah.
but I wasn't, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you can only be so many places. So you were just sharing with me a quote that I thought was a perfect thing to
Yeah, let
start
me
our
let me
session. Yeah.
let me read it. One of the principal engineers on FSD that can be followed on X. He posts quite frequently on X, and his insights are amazing. And his name is 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐧𝐝𝐚𝐲. Um, and I mean, he posts some great stuff about all sorts of interesting things. But I'll read it. The constant examination under the microscope is the reason why eventually we will be making a better product. When others only need it to make it to five, we push ourselves to 11 as our passing grade. And I thought that that was really profound because I think that's exactly where Tesla finds itself versus the competition in terms of how the press eats them alive for anything. But in the end, I think it works to their advantage, and that's what he's saying. Because they really gotta press it hard and get it literally perfect.
Yeah,
Uh,
during the course of the week, those of us on X, like we've seen lots and lots and lots of fails on the Waymo.
yeah,
That if it was a Tesla, they would be talked about all over there'd be multiple press reports on these, and because there are significant fails, going into center dividers, going off into construction zones through fences, running into poles, lots and lots of fails, and yeah. I think you're right. We have to be prepared for that. And in no way should anybody expect that these vehicles are never going to have an accident. They're going to have an accident.
absolutely.
And they're going to have an accident that's caused by the Tesla. Uh,
Yeah. I
it's going to,
mean,
yeah,
if you follow a human driver and you watch their behavior and you see all the things they do, um, it's extraordinary. There aren't more accidents, and there are a lot. There's a lot of fatalities, especially on highways particularly. But what's interesting is like I was watching the Waymo. It's very clear to me from a software engineering perspective that Waymo's decision process is largely algorithmic and not AI based. I think their perception side is AI based. So in other words, they're finding objects in the perceived, space, dynamic, static, uh, through AI. And obviously, in other words, their sensors are bringing that in. There's an AI processing to determine what those things are. But I think that a large amount of the decision process is algorithmic code because you can tell that the Waymo rides, if you've ever been in a Waymo, are much more herky jerky. They're much more stop and go. They're much more. You can see the decisions happening, and when they, it's very very hard to do it that way. Tesla threw it out because wasn't um, it wasn't a solution. Like they didn't feel that they could get there, and so instead, what obviously Tesla has done is they've cherry picked the best driving data and then even produced some synthetically, which is and remember when they produce something synthetically, they're producing the perfect driving behavior for the scenario. And by training the system that way, one, you get smoothness because the decision process is different in how inference is doing it. And then there's a lot of engineering that makes that smoothness happen. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. There's an enormous amount of stuff that goes into reducing that photon to control latency. That's real solid engineering work there. But I think, I just feel looking at these two solutions that Waymo can't really catch Tesla. It's a turtle hair thing, right? Right now, it's perceived by many that Waymo is dramatically ahead. But like, let's be serious. They have 1,500 cars operating in 6 cities. Tesla can put 100 cars on the road a day. And I was reading Waymo's plans, and really between now and the end of the year, uh, if you look at where they're going to spend, they're doing about 40 cars a week,
Yeah.
and that's really like they're going to lose.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's super hard, right? I mean, so they've got like I think a disadvantage in terms of the technique, and then they've got a disadvantage when it comes to a non-vertically integrated system,
Right.
right? They're not doing the hardware effectively, um, and so they just can't scale. Um, and I think they're gonna, I put a post up and I kind of tongue in cheek, but I said, we're at the iPhone moment for Tesla, where Tesla is effectively like the iPhone and Waymo's more like the BlackBerry.
Yeah.
And BlackBerry didn't have a scale problem, but it certainly had a problem adapting its technology to something that was far superior. And then Uber and Lyft are sitting down in Nokia Ericsson land, right? They're gonna be seen as old tech or something. I don't know what.
Yeah, I just had a thought too about what you said earlier with regard to human drivers. And I hadn't thought about it this way yet, but and maybe others have already thought it through this way. If you're a passenger, pretty much in any car, even if it's professionally driven by a cabbie or an Uber person, but especially if you're just in your brother's car or your sister-in-law, or even your spouse, your teenager, you're picking apart if you're like me anyway, you're picking apart that drive the entire time. Oh, why did you speed? In your head, hopefully you're not being a backseat driver, but in your head, you're like, oh, I would have accelerated more into that lane, or I would have, why are you sitting behind this truck so long? So, I mean, it's pretty clear that I've always said it's a miracle that humans aren't in more accidents than they are because of how bad we are as drivers. But when you all of a sudden turn loose this mechanical, computer driven, eight eyes, always alert, never asleep, never sleep at the switch system, it's going to be amazingly better than the best human driver.
Yeah, I've written on this several times where I said and it's sort of, I start with the idea of what makes you think humans are good at this, right? I mean, really, humans are not good at driving. And to your point, it is somewhat profound that there aren't more accidents. Roads are largely built for human drivers, obviously, because that's kind of how we evolved it. But there's no doubt that the catch up from from where we are with full self-driving today, as we see it in Austin, is the worst it will ever be.
Yes.
And when it gets better, it doesn't get better by a linear, in linear kind of proportions. It goes kind of like orders of magnitude.
Mhm.
So we'll see it. We'll see that over the next. I mean, look where we were. Geez, I think 18 months ago, if I have my calendar correct, we first saw version 12 in the market. That was the first end-to-end AI.
Right.
And look where we've gotten in, let's just call it 2 years because I could be off, but it's around that.
Yeah.
And if it's 2 years, imagine what two years
From now.
from now will look like when you have cars, I mean, you'll have a version 14 coming, a larger model trained on more data. You'll have Cybercab on the road with hardware 5 being able to take full advantage
Right.
of that type of model, meaning, there's somewhat of an order of magnitude compute increase on hardware 5, about maybe 5x really. But that doesn't happen to the human brain. The human brain doesn't get better. It gets only slowly better over
Speak,
time.
speak for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, you do get better as a driver, but what you can't do is what happens with our car is we are literally the car is like being injected with the best brain
Yeah.
by software,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Always
So
upgrading.
if
Yeah.
we as a human through experience marginally get better through our driving experiences, the car doesn't have to settle that time out. It just gets injected with software, which has already aggregated that set of behaviors. So yeah, we're definitely entering a place where few people see that driving will just be autonomous and humans will start to look like the odd man out. And I don't know. I
So
don't
we,
know.
yeah, so we made that switch. We've had supervised drivers actually sitting in the driving chair with passengers being tested for months and months now up in your neighborhood. But now we have made that switch. We've made that switch where we've got the safety driver over in the passenger side, and we now have essentially the community in the back seat.
Yeah.
It's folks that appreciate FSD, appreciate Tesla, Tesla bulls and whatnot, but it's a pretty big step.
Right.
Talk to me about that step.
Yeah, I think as we were discussing earlier, the reality is that, all testing, all good plans are, what do we said? All good plans. There's the old saying is all good plans, war plans fail when you meet the enemy.
Yes.
I mean, it's sort of like when you throw the real customer in the car, everything is profoundly different. It looks like it's going to be the same. It looks like you can predict it. It looked like you could throw hundreds of employees in the back seat of these Model Ys and run them around Austin and everything. You checked every box, but you put real customers in the car and then it just changes. Um, and so I think one of the primary reasons the observer is there, I think there's a couple of reasons the observer is there. So just to be clear, what we're talking about is a Tesla employee sitting in the passenger seat of the car who probably from an active controls point of view can do an intervention. We've seen that behavior, but really has no second by second control of the car whatsoever.
Right.
And I think the observer's function is possibly threefold. One, I think, is observing the passenger's experience quietly, listening in, trying to understand what issues the passengers are having that they didn't see. Like said a lot of times the app was out of sync with the car's version. Okay, it's something to report in, or some customers literally didn't know how to get out of the car. Interesting. But the observer can observe that behavior. The observer can also observe the car's behavior. And because they're trained to see the anomalies, they can pick up things that the customers are not going to report in. I mean, the customers may be so busy with the experience and playing the music and they're videoing the thing that they don't see the Robotaxi blow a stop sign or take an illegal right-hand turn, when it says no, turn. So the observer is zoned in on that and can bring that data back to the Tesla ops guys, engineering side, instantaneously, right? Right after the ride, they could literally call in. I suspect one of the reasons the cars are sometimes out of service or listed as not available is that I think the observer is actually calling in and reporting on situations that he or she determined during that last ride.
Right.
And then I think the third reason that the observer might be there is it's just a clever way for Tesla to place an employee between any kind of behavior that might occur, like unsettling behavior from the spectating audience, meaning like, people protesting or trying to stop the cars artificially or doing something that is kind of, unseemly and I think that it allows Tesla to say, hey, to those people, sort of there's a deterrent. There's an employee in this car. It's not just the customers, and there's somebody here that is probably trained to call in and get some help if there's something, because we haven't seen that, luckily.
Right.
No one's reported that, which is great. I mean,
Yeah.
nobody needs that kind of junk. But so I think the observer is super important, and I think it's the observer is going to be selectively removed from the car. how, I mean, there's plenty of ways that they can remove them. I mean, it's not, they can't scale this way and they won't scale this way. Um, but maybe when they open the geofence to a wider area, the observers will be more situated with cars in these newer areas that are open. And eventually they'll just be removed from
Mhm.
the system.
Mhm.
I mean, I could also imagine another scenario where Tesla starts to rate the um, the passenger, how many rides they had, and then tries to make available cars with non-observers to the the most experienced passengers, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
I mean, it's a little harder to do because it's not super scaled, but you could imagine that there's certain of us we have a lot of experience with FSD, and we would properly report behavior of the car and so forth, where the observer would be like extraneous.
So of course, I'm the optimist. That's my job, is to be the optimist in every room.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I'm hopeful that the observers go away soon.
yeah.
I'm hopeful that they scale up soon. I'm hopeful that they expand the territory, the geofenced area soon and far, not just across the river like Waymo, but to the entire region. These are all things that I'm hoping happen soon. I'm going to ask the engineer, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think the real answer is Tesla is taking a data-based data-based approach to determining next steps. They're not they're letting the situation on the ground develop as it develops, and they're saying, okay, here's what we want to do. Like if they feel that, let's say they're triaging 100 different problems that have been reported by the observers, uh, their hands are full, right? They're looking at data from the cars. Remember, these cars, of course, are holding all the data and only purging it once Tesla deems it um, unnecessary to retrieve, and possibly most of that data is going to the cloud anyway. Um, so Tesla has a way to look back, but the question is, if they want to fix something, let's say they put out, it's been reported that the car, this sort of commercial unsupervised release is 13.3. It doesn't matter what the version number is, but let's call it 13.3. Um, if they're observing behaviors they want to fix actively with newly trained data, they've got to uh, create some fine tune, you know, they got to train, put more data.
Mhm, mhm.
So maybe like, let's say an example is the car observer sees the car take an illegal right-hand turn at a stoplight and it's been reported at three different stoplights in the geofenced area. What is Tesla going to do? They're going to take the data of those instances or go out and create new data for those things, and they're going to train the system, and then they're going to fix the problem. So I think the answer is they're going to go as fast as as I think they're trying to go as fast as they can, but they're only going to go as fast as they should.
Mhm.
Um, and ultimately, all this doesn't matter because when we blink our eyes and we look back a year from now and we say, geez, remember in June we thought that they should go faster. Here they are in June of 26, and there's a couple thousand cars out there, obviously running around completely without observers and in multiple cities. So I think it's really situational is the answer.
Sure, 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 sure. So, what are things that you're going to be looking for? What are you paying attention to?
Well, I am looking to see if obviously when they increase the geofence, that'll be interesting. Um, and I think they will incrementally and possibly in ways we don't even perceive or know. Like, I mean, there'll be a lot of people
Right, right,
report it,
right. Report.
but I'm just saying that, all of a sudden these areas of Austin are reachable and they weren't. And it's going to go sort of unnoticed a little bit. So I think they'll increase the geofence area, and I think they'll start pulling the observers, and I think it'll happen in that order. Because observers, I think, will have great utility in those new areas. Um, and then I think I don't think there's a real marker for us as consumer owning owning Tesla vehicles, like when we get our new version.
Mhm.
I don't think that's a necessary part of this thing. I think, to me, having a very quiet period for the end customer getting FSD releases was, to me, a huge tell that Tesla was working their backsides off to get to this commercial
Sure,
unsupervised release.
sure.
And ultimately, what I see happening here is that they're going to converge this model, right? They're going to basically the un there's stuff in unsupervised release that's different than the supervised release.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay. And ultimately, I suggest that there's going to be one release. The commercial and consumer release will be the same release, and it will be a moded release. That is, it will either run in supervised or unsupervised mode.
Mhm.
That that's a guess, but I think that's going to happen because that's the most obvious thing that makes sense to me. Um, yeah, I think that's largely true, and I think the um, you're going to see more of these self deliveries. What did they say? Full self delivery, like we
Yeah,
saw the car
yeah,
delivered itself. And yeah, and then there was an issue there where it wasn't an issue. It was just something that was sort of obvious to me. Is that the customer received the car? Obviously, Tesla employees were on the receiving end of that because it was the first time it occurred. And then they did what they pulled the software back. They side loaded the production release version because what was on the car was probably the same software that was is on the Robotaxis, and it's not production. So
mhm,
they went back a release. Some people said, "Oh my God, look, they're not ready to do this," and it's like that's not it. What they're not ready to do is just have that single moded superset release.
right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So,
I think in terms of going to a new city, that'll be a huge tell, and I suspect it will be in Texas. I've written on that. I don't see the reason to play around with the California markets right now. I
yeah,
mean,
the
it's going to come, probably
yeah.
San Francisco over LA for sure.
Well, Elon actually specifically said that San Francisco and LA would be the next two cities. Now,
Yeah,
whether or not that was kind of an offhand remark or not,
yeah,
my thinking was that his reasons for doing that would be that those cities are familiar with unsupervised taxis.
yeah, yeah. Customers are
The customer
clearly,
as well as the neighbors. I mean, just the folks
yeah,
walking around are not going to be as shocked or as likely
right.
to do something silly. So that there would be some advantages to going into
Oh,
familiar
sure, sure.
territory.
Yeah, yeah. I,
Uh,
I absolutely suspect that San Francisco, followed by LA in that order. I think it's in that order, my guess. Um, would be prime. I mean, basically anywhere where Waymo is, they'll go
yeah,
because Waymo has sort of paved or driven and made it clear to people that there are these autonomous vehicles running around their city, and they start to get used to them. So makes complete sense. Although I just think Texas is a really good fertile ground from a regulatory perspective, and the cars that they're producing are nearby. You
yeah.
know, so to head off to Fort Worth or something like that would just be um, easy in a different way. Yeah.
Well, and they have a nice situation there where they could spread from Austin if they wanted to, and just continue to spread north and south,
Yeah. Yeah.
and go up to Dallas and down to I forget what's south of them,
San Antonio,
San
maybe.
Antonio. Yeah,
Um, I think it's interesting is one of the kind of clever things, sort of what you're mentioning, is that they could kind of go more into the suburban area of, the suburban areas outskirts of Austin and serve that market, not because it's a customer rich market, but because it tends to prove part of their scale out.
right.
Um, to kind of, it's like we have this idea that we keep talking about cities, but
Mhm.
eventually, you know, the deep suburbs will be,
Yeah.
and I think the biggest issue I mean, not the biggest issue, a issue is certainly when they get beyond this, what's happening right now is that they're doing an invite only
Mhm.
model, and they're expanding that, and they let you sign up. There's I think it's tesla.com/robotaxi, and you can sign up to essentially get an invite. I mean, of course, based on your city, probably based on your city, but obviously they'll expand that list greatly, but availability is an issue, right? They have you don't want to wait too long. I've several of the Tesla regulars have posted that they could wait up to 15 minutes for a car recently, like this week, like the later part of this week. So clearly they don't have a lot of supply out there right now. And there's some interesting issues here that obviously they're using Model Ys right now because Cybercab is not ready. And the Model Ys are perfectly ready for this, but they don't necessarily have, massive build out of specialized charge infrastructure. So, you see the cars going to this certain warehouse area of Austin overnight, and I suspect that they clean them and charge certain ones. I don't think they have to charge everyone because they're not using that much right now. I think the other thing, Randy, is they're going to improve pickup and drop off locations. I consider that one of the hardest problems outside a huge number of hard problems because that's one where the AI isn't particularly, like right now the AI is really about driving.
Yeah.
And drop off and pickup is real tricky in many cases. Where we as humans make pretty good decisions about like where would you pick somebody up? Oh, I'm not going to park here. I'm not going to pull over here. This is not, this is too trafficked, or it seems like it's a good spot, but why pull in that parking lot when it's so busy that it's just going to cost the person 10 minutes to get out of the parking lot?
Right.
When they could have pulled alongside the road or something. So that stuff's hard. It's and I think that's, maybe not, I wouldn't say, but I mean, Uber and Lyft have really dialed that in, right? You see,
to a certain extent. I mean,
yeah,
I've taken a lot of Ubers, and
like
they don't always show up in that great a location. I mean,
yeah, but you do see things like pick up at door 3 at arrivals,
right. Oh yeah, that's
at
easy.
terminal 3, they
Yeah.
or the certain rideshare locations, and it's taken time. If you go back 5 years taking Ubers, it rather, now it's much more set up as to where the pickup and drop off locations are. So I think that's going to take time to smooth out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think as somebody pointed out, they called the car while they were still in their hotel room, and so the car wanted to pick them up at that at that
That GPS location.
GPS location.
Yeah.
That was impossible. So
Yeah.
those are going to be some things that it's going to have.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, in that case, what one has to realize, right? I mean, the software has to note this is a hotel.
Yeah.
In this, using a map-based system, I'm sure the platform that's running in the cloud does all the heavy lifting here. But it recognizes, okay, that GPS location puts the person, on this side of the hotel, but clearly the pickup location is the lobby front
Right.
area. So you're not going to pick them up behind the hotel, or to your point, try to pick them up practically in the room.
Right.
Yeah, that takes some time to get that right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, to me, that has little to do with the on-car software. That is more part of the rideshare platform that's operating in the cloud is largely telling the car, we have a pickup at this location, comes in as a GPS location, and it's translating it to possibly one or more ordered stopping points.
So this occurred to me the other day. I was talking about this. I can't remember with who. Is this going to be a reason why it will be a good idea to send those 60 cars into virtually every major city as they roll this out, looking for the right way to ingress and egress the in and out burger, the right way to make a decision with regard to that hotel, the right way. There's all these little nuances. Now, I was just in San Diego, actually leaving in a few minutes to go to San Diego. But I was just in San Diego a few weeks ago, and it really shocked me at how good it was at getting into a little strip mall where I wanted to go to an IHOP.
Yeah.
And it found the right entrance, not the wrong entrance. I mean, and it was a complicated situation. But then on leaving, it completely blew it. And it was complicated. It was a very complicated exit.
Yeah. I mean, part of that,
A human probably would have blown it most of the time.
yeah, I think it's a two-part answer. That part of it is the car's software, but a lot of it is the platform in the cloud, making decisions for the car as to what to do.
Mhm.
But to your point, there are many traverse, drop-off points that require strange traversals that are not obvious. And, while legal and the car's FSD could manage through that, it would be like, imagine taking a left into a shopping center at the first entrance where everyone knows it's insane. Like, you wait 20 minutes to get that left done. And
Right.
if you just go up another quarter mile and you take, or whatever, half a mile or third of a mile, whatever, that, you take that left and it's an easy thing because you have a signal or something, So while it's legal to get into the left-hand turn lane, it's stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the car itself, I don't think there's really any specific part of the FSD platform that is learning on that basis. I think that is something very different, and I think it's mostly, um, what now? How could Tesla figure that out on its own without reporting? It could probably pull the data, right? So what do we have here? We have a circumstance where the car goes into a left-hand turn lane, and they may start pulling timing stats on that,
Mhm.
right? So they say car got in the left-hand lane uh, under a minute or under 30 seconds to get through that turn. We don't care. But if that were to proceed on to a minute and a half, we're
Mhm.
going to look at that situation.
Mhm. Mhm.
And maybe they have some. I've written about this idea of micro geofencing, and
Mhm.
the concept is that the car. I believe this is happening right now on the ground in Austin with Robotaxi, and people are not aware of it.
Yeah.
I believe that the cars are geofenced out of very, very specific, minute locations, particular turns,
Right.
particular one-way streets, maybe, not down south or whatever the main drag there is, or um, and they're able to put those geofences in play, um, and can pull them as well,
Yeah.
right? I lost your video there.
Yeah. I'm back.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, so I mean, imagine that's a very transparent thing to the riders
Sure.
for the most part, unless they wonder why the car went 3 blocks to take a left and it didn't go down a certain street, and it doesn't perceive that it, or they don't perceive it ever does. And that's probably because that street's geofenced off, and the Tesla just determined it's silly to go that way.
Oh yeah. Waymo definitely does this.
Yes.
And even I've had Uber drivers who, are making those kind of decisions. So, and in fact, the car as we drive now, I've seen my car, make decisions that I wouldn't have made, but that were just safer. And I think that's 100% smart. There'll be,
Yeah, and you'll see that as the platform matures, you'll see that happening dynamically in the system,
yeah,
so that it'll avoid trafficked roads or developing situations.
right.
I mean, I saw one where Robotaxi had to take a right through a sea of bicycles that were running. Did you see that video? It was,
I did, yes.
yeah, and someone posted how amazing the car didn't try to merge within into the bikes, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if it knew that.
Yeah,
I think it possibly got lucky and pulled up ahead to where, there was a police officer guiding, like, kind of the head of that set of bikes. I mean, there were like 300 bikes.
right.
Okay. And then it just found typical cars, and it got in and it took a right and everybody was praising it. And maybe there is already trained logic there, right? But that's an example that I think it learns to mature that over time. It
Yeah,
says, I'm not going to, because what would tell the car? Imagine that you had two, 300 bikes sitting there and there's a brake,
yeah,
like enough
yeah,
where the
yeah, yeah.
car could get in. We wouldn't pull into that brake, right?
No,
We would either
no,
go ahead or wait from behind. We wouldn't do that. There's some drivers that would. Um, but Robotaxi probably would. It's not really necessarily trained to avoid a sea of bicycles like that.
yeah,
So
yeah. And depending on how big the break is, it might, dif- yeah, absolutely potential for that. Now, again, these are such edge cases. They're
right.
so unusual.
But you know what's crazy? They're there.
Yeah, they're
I
there.
mean,
Well,
like,
there's a Waymo video out there where the Waymo joined the parade. I mean, it
yeah,
just drove right into a parade, like a wacko human that, lost their
right,
mind. It just,
right.
and people are getting around it, trying to stand in front of it to keep
I
it.
I think that's why a lot of um, people, I think it's like a lot of people that have some technical know-how, meaning that the folks that don't have any technical know-how will say humans are better than robots. We make better decisions. Okay, great. But I think people who have some technical, I think that's why they think FSD is in fact a very hard problem because they see that very long, long tail
Right.
of emergent situations in the field.
Mhm.
And you're like, how would you have ever seen that? And how does humans they think has some kind of intrinsic machine logic that says, oh, I wouldn't break into that
Right.
bike, um, but it's just a problem based. It's just a data problem ultimately.
Yeah, I think I've been begging Tesla for more data, data, data. It was so much fun for we as stockholders and or just enthusiasts to know more data. But I was just as you're talking again, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, what are the serious accidents really? And I folks that really follow this channel know that I don't know what was it 40 years ago or whatever. I got involved in the Santa Monica Diamond Lane fiasco, and set up a group that eventually got the Diamond Lane taken off of the Santa Monica Freeway.
Mm.
And so I that was my first dive into transportation. I learned a ton about transportation. The number one, at the time, we were making the claim that the number one cause of serious accidents is unequal speed between lanes on
Oh
freeway.
yeah, yeah,
And that's, of course, I'm sure that you would have to add in there drunk drivers. Some of the most serious accidents, of course, are T-bones at intersections.
yeah.
So if we would look at the accidents that are most likely to cause injury or death, how many of those would a robotaxi ever be involved in other than by the same chance, of somebody running that red light at 50? I mean, I had somebody run a red light at 45 and hit me with no brakes at all.
Right.
I had minor injuries. The car was totaled, but I mean, that's that's the same as getting bit by a shark. I mean, it's just one of those things. So you wouldn't be able to put that off to the robotaxi. So what kinds of things are really potentially a problem that could be caused by a robotaxi are not avoided by a robotaxi? How many of those are there? And I bet there aren't very many.
It's interesting because there is this perception that a mistake made by the car would have led to an accident if there was another car around. So, I'll give you an example. There was an example of a robotaxi kind of, I think it was trying to make a left-hand turn,
Right.
and it got sort of into the other lane.
It did the shutter.
Yeah, it did a little bit of that kind of herky jerk thing, and it pulled into that other lane, and then it corrected itself, right? But what people miss is if there was a oncoming car, it may have not made that decision in the very first place.
Right.
So it was not, while it wasn't the right decision, it's also one that could possibly not have caused an accident.
Exactly. Well, in fact, I don't remember whether it was Elon or Ramaswamy or one of them has said the number one job, the algorithm's number one hard coded thing is don't hit anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so if you pull into a lane and there's nothing,
There.
and even if it's an oncoming lane and there's nothing there, then there's no there, right?
Right,
You can
right.
you can video it all day and make it sound like, well, look, if there was a car there, what would happen? And then that person is not examining the idea that if there was a car there, maybe it wouldn't have done it in the very first place.
Right.
And in fact, it probably wouldn't have, because you can kind of think about how FSD is trained, and it would have probably recognized that that was not an available lane for it or someone was just, I mean, we have seen some video of FSD drivers where a car will be driving on the wrong side of the highway. In other words,
Yeah.
completely the wrong side of the highway, which is one of the worst things that can happen. And the Robotaxi avoids it. I mean, it's not like the Robotaxi said, well, this is my lane and
Right.
I have the right to go in this lane, and oh, I see something coming. Oh, I still have the right to stay in this lane, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
we'll have a head-on crash. No, the data is going to tell it,
Get out of
get
the way.
out of the lane,
Yeah.
right? And to your point about running red lights, and one of the things that people don't often think about is, here's this vehicle with essentially 8 eyes, 360 view, running the decision framework 15 to 30 times a second. um, if that car wasn't coming through, wasn't braking, and you got hit, you could have potentially avoided that had you been looking that way at that moment. And maybe that moment was just a short
Hmm.
amount of time. Maybe you did look left, right,
Hmm.
left, or maybe you look left and you look right and you went and the car hit you. But the Robotaxi does not looking left, right, left. It's seeing that 360 at 30 hertz. So its ability to mitigate those types of situations is far greater than a human by maybe 2 to 3 orders of magnitude.
Oh yeah, we've seen it over and over and over again on some of these videos. Well, we need to wrap it up.
Mm.
Any last thoughts about your observations over the last week?
No, I just think I'll just keep my eye on these little scale outs.
Yeah, yeah.
That'll give us all the signal we need to know whether Tesla has confidence or Tesla's kind of digging in and trying to fix problems. And as I said, I think the theme here is they have on one side they want to go as fast as they can, but they'll go as fast as they should. And 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 I think what we've also seen, it's important to point out, is I think people somehow think that Elon is just going to throw it out and he's a high risk guy, and I don't think we see that behavior on the ground here. I think we see a very cautious company doing exactly the right thing in a very responsible way.
100%,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Good way to wrap it up. All right, Phil, thanks as always for coming on and giving us your engineering perspective. That's
Yeah.
it's a very, very different place. And listen, I want to let everybody know that because of this trip to my brother's today, and I was trying to set up all these different videos, I screwed up. Oh no. So if you are watching right now and you're thinking it should be the Monday morning show, somehow I put the Monday morning show on at 5 o'clock this morning. So if you missed it, you go back and check out. I'll be able to put the card up for that so that you can go and go back and see Monday morning, which is normally on Sunday night, but somehow ended up this week on Sunday morning. If any of what I just said made sense. Anyway, that's all I got for now.
I have no idea what you just said.
Phil, thanks again for being on. And to all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.